The big news today, yes, inflation got better. The lowest it has been in 2 years. But if you believe the media, cost of living crisis is over.
There is optimism tonight that Australia is winning the fight against inflation.
The welcome plunge in inflation.
The inflation figure falls, and so do the chances of another interest rate rise next week.
But as always, let's look in the numbers behind the numbers. You see, there are a basket of goods which go into making up the inflation number. Some things, the prices have well and truly gone down. Others are still almost double the overall inflation number, which means the expectations of it getting better and better and better and better and better every month just told your horses. According to the 3 months that was the December quarter, the single biggest factor in inflation in the country was insurance and financial services. Now, this has been one of those issues that's been bubbling along as people try to reinsure their house, car, boat, whatever, is that the insurance premiums you're paying are way higher than they used to be. The average here, apparently, only about 8%. Now, increases in taxation on tobacco as well as increased taxes on alcohol mean that it is staying way above the number. And then, small irrelevant details are above the national inflation number, like housing, health, education, or, food and something to drink. But the reason I say that there should be a little caution, and again, we'll always take better over worse, no question, but the idea that it's all over, have a look at the month-by-month numbers, because obviously the December quarter is 3 months, average it out, you get the number that you get. But have a look at the numbers that were there in December alone. Now, remember, this was also a time when $800 million less was spent at the shops and more than 100,000 people lost a full-time job. Now, gas was well and truly above inflation. Now, the overall inflation's got a 4 figure in front of it, so everything above that is things like gas and household fuels, insurance, bread and cereal, that stuff you could avoid to pay. Rent's still way too high. Non-alcoholic beverages way too high. Food, and then again you get into the alcohol, tobacco, and then automotive fuel. Now, that interesting number about automotive fuel is that anyone who watches the prices certainly knows in places like Sydney and Melbourne there's been a big spike, like 20-cent spike in the past couple of days, so we'll obviously see where we are in a month and 2 months' time. But you see that most people believe that with the headline figure starting to go down, that automatically means that there's going to be no rises in interest rates. This seemed to be the overall thumping message that you got from much of the media. And that would be awesome. I hope that there are no further increases in interest rates. But don't forget, the Reserve Bank wants to get inflation somewhere between 2% and 3%. We're currently on our way to 4.5%. But the logic is right now that if the idea was that we were supposed to start feeling the pain, these numbers are starting to show that we are feeling the pain. And there's a reason that we can't have any more interest rate rises, which was, remember the last one, put another 1 million people into a thing called mortgage stress. Well, if there was going to be another interest rate rise to try to get us to the 2 to 3% band, and we are still not at 2 to 3%, well, that would push another 1.6 million people into a scenario where they may not have enough money to pay off their house, they may have to sell their house. And mortgage stress has been a major issue. In fact, in 2023, towards the end of it, more Australians were suffering mortgage stress than any other nation because we take very big loans out to pay very big prices for properties. And because your wages didn't increase by the 13 times that interest rates did, obviously it starts to hurt. But again, pay attention to what the Reserve Bank is thinking here. Every month, be it Philip Lowe or Michelle Bullock, they say where they want inflation to be is between 2 and 3%. If they start to see things are heading in that direction, do they not touch the brake or the accelerator and just naturally let it go? Or do they try to speed up getting to that 2 to 3%, which means they may well hit the brake, and that again is another interest rate rise? I would suggest, just not knowing how these people think, you've got to imagine the pressure will be on them to do nothing in their February meeting, as they did, of course, in their December meeting. But also, there are some people who know the financial world a lot better than me who are saying, OK, great number, no question, no boo-hoo. However, it's not over. in fact, the pain could still be going for a long period of time. In fact, some of the columnists in the Fin are out there saying that people are going to become a little bit irrationally optimistic, and that's good, that you want optimism. I'm not ever going to talk down our economy. I am not going to give credit to a government that sat back and took $1,500 off you when you were hurting and now wants to give you, $15 back. I'm not going to be doing that. But other financial analysts are saying that basically all of the different things that go into cost of living, the pain goes for another 5 years. So while the government hopes that interest rates start to fall in and around the middle of the year, the tax cuts, as small as they are, roll in around the middle of the year, then the opportunity of an election as early as August would all work in their favour. But according to that analyst, not a chance. In fact, another 5 years of where we are right now. I hope they're wrong. But still, the suggestion that it's all roses tonight, not quite. Meantime, as the cost of living situation bites around the country, you live it, we talk about it all the time, unbelievably, we have a scenario where last year the members of the House of Representatives and the Senate, they got their biggest pay rise in 10 years. You didn't get one, but they got their biggest pay rise in 10 years. And then the people who slow play the ball for Conservative governments and then kick the ball further than the politicians can publicly say, but they move anyway in the public service, well, guess what? Public servants got their biggest pay rise in a decade. And now the people who advise the politicians to tell the public servants what to do now want a pay rise bigger than their bosses and bigger than the people inside the public service. They demand 20%. Talk about these people who advise the politicians about the Canberra bubble within the bubble within the bubble. But according to the article that is associated here, let's read here, where the Albanese government staffers are now demanding a 20% pay rise over 3 years, according to the cost of living situation, on top of the 9% pay rise they want this year, followed by subsequent pay rises of 6% and 5%. The Community and Public Sector Union says they need this because of the unreasonable working hours that the staffers do. They also talk about stories of the culture in parliamentary workplaces has acted as a catalyst for change. Well, I noticed the only thing that seemed to suggest there should be a catalyst for change here was, of course, the legal action between the former future Prime Minister of Australia, Monique Ryan, and one of her staffers. That, of course, was all about how many hours she was working. But something that should also be being discussed about the change of culture in Canberra is a story which popped up a couple of years ago and then, funnily enough, silence the second that it was printed. Nobody wanted to talk about it because it's only the Liberal Party that has a problem with women who work for the government. And isn't it amazing that all of the stories, and now that these people are in government, nobody goes back and double checks about what has happened to the more than 50 women who came forward talking about the behaviour of Labor Party MPs, former shadow ministers, potentially current ministers, I don't know. Is this stuff that's deep and dark in the past, or is it stuff that was all brought to the surface when the people that are in government were in opposition? Now remember, these were 50 staffers who talked about the culture inside the Labor Party, and they speak of the MPs or ministers or shadow ministers that they have worked for. Quote, "He is a man who punches the wall next to his female staffer's head, calling her a ... She passes the news, when he passes news on that he doesn't want to hear. He is a married man who plied a young woman with drinks until she had no idea what was happening. He promised others at the gathering that he would get her home safely before putting her in a cab and had sex with her when she had no ability to give consent." No follow-up on these stories, is there? These were all staffers, by the way, who were writing about it on social media. The next day, he texted to demand that she take the morning after pill and blamed her for what happened, saying she was so drunk that she came onto him. And then he threatened to tell no one. It goes on. The culture in Canberra that nobody wants to talk about. He is a married man who harasses female staffers by sending them over 50 text messages in a night asking her to meet him, to have sex with him. And when he hears nothing back, he sends aggressive texts warning her not to tell anyone that he contacted her. He is a man some 40 years my senior who groped and tried to stick his tongue down my throat in a lift at work. Did he follow up on this as to whether any of these people are on the backbenches of the current government or in the ministry? Are they people who had left the parliament years and years ago, so it doesn't matter, or are any of these people still somewhere inside the Labor machine? Of course, tumbleweeds. No follow-ups on any of that. Yet the reason the 20% pay rise for all staff is just because of how hard they're working. Well, at times, some of them seem to have in the past been working for people who you couldn't pay me enough to go anywhere near. Meantime, as for the actual average Australian worker, the pay rise that you need to keep up with everything that is going on at the moment, well, it would be quite significant. In fact, according to some advice given to the Daily Mail today via the financial comparison group CanStar, you hear about those CanStar ratings on products? About $4,000 is what a pay rise you're going to need to help to pay for cost of living. A full-time salary of $95,000 would need a pay rise of $3,919 to cover the cost of living expenses. Which is why I stand by what I've said for more than a week now. $15 a week, $22 a week, $32 a week or $41 a week does not and will not touch the sides. Now, there's been a story that's been going on for the past few days, and I kind of considered it to be a story that was really only making a lot of news in one part of the country, but it is now starting to spread around. And it's all to do with the Animal Justice MP out of Victoria. Now, the Animal Justice MP was annoyed that the Victorian government is seemingly sticking with duck hunting. I've got to say, while I have no opinion on duck hunting, it is quite bizarre that the super woke that ban everything in Victoria are actually still fine with the killing of ducks, but go on as it does. Maybe that's because they need shooters and fishers votes in the upper house, but of course the reality is that they actually need the Animal Justice vote. You see, the Animal Justice vote, along with the cannabis MPs and the Greens, delivers in the upper house of Victoria a pretty steady flow of votes to ensure that whatever ideas the Victorian government have, it ends up becoming law.